Marx wasn't alone. Although the very idea of politics changing anything is out of fashion, it's worth remembering that many of the groups who have status today only do so because they fought for it politically. They wrote pamphlets, changed laws, organized strikes, lay down in front of tanks, and burnt their underwear in public. I caught the bus to Denmark Hill in South London. From 1842 until 1871, it was the home of the critic and writer John Ruskin, who fought a passionate campaign to raise the status and conditions of the British working class.
Ruskin hated almost everything about the world that his mid-Victorian contemporaries were creating. He hated railways, Oxford Street, the sprawl of suburbia, Crystal Palace, but also smaller things like the invention of the fold-away umbrella and the telegram. But what he hated most of all were the values of his mid-Victorian contemporaries. He hated their obsession with wealth. He described them as the most wealth-obsessed people that have ever existed on the face of the earth. The ruling goddess of the age could very well be described as the goddess of getting on, he wrote bitterly.
Ruskin believed that the Industrial Revolution and the wealth it was producing had warped the values of his contemporaries. The modern haste to be rich, he said, was condemning the workers to life in a labyrinth of black walls and loathsome passages, a life of filthy slums, polluted air, and dangerous, stinking factories. Most educated Victorian opinion believed there wasn't much that could be done about such degradation, that it was just the inevitable, natural outcome of the laws of economics. But Ruskin would have none of it. He demanded free education, decent housing, and access to green space for everyone. And most of all, he challenged the central idea of his age, the idea that there was something admirable about being rich.
Ruskin too was desperate to be wealthy, but he had a very different idea of wealth in mind. What he wanted was not money. He wanted kindness, intelligence, sensitivity, godliness, a set of virtues he referred to simply as life. There is no true wealth, he wrote, but life. That country is wealthiest which nourishes the greatest number of happy and noble human beings. Most of those people commonly considered wealthy are in truth no more wealthy than the locks of their strong boxes.
Ruskin made a difference. He set in train many of the arguments that were to lead to the creation of the welfare state. He remains an inspiring example of how, by making a lot of noise, by acting politically, a person can start to alter the values of his world.
In 1906, 6 years after Ruskin's death, 27 Labour MPs entered Parliament for the first time. And when they were asked who was the person who'd most influenced them to pursue politics, 17 of them answered that it was John Ruskin. Mahatma Gandhi, for his part, said that John Ruskin had been the single greatest influence in his life.
Potter's International Hotel, off the A323 near Farnborough, Hampshire. The every woman, women in business lunch. In low-ceilinged rooms, businesswomen are picking at salads.
Are you all in business?
Yes.
Yeah. What business are you in?
Well, we have a wonderful new business. It's called Glass Suckers.
What's that?
It's it's decoration on your glasses
On your glasses?
with a miniature suction cup.
This is not an event to set the world alight, but stop and think about it for a minute. Less than 100 years ago, this gathering would have been literally inconceivable. There weren't any women in business at all. This particular route to status and respect was blocked to them. And the fact that things have changed so much is down in large part to political agitation.
Women being able to open a bank account in their own right was only 30 years ago.
Even the women here, they wouldn't have believed 20 years ago that they would be here. People listen to you more. If you're running a business that's successful, you're employing people, suddenly people will sit up and listen to you.
The political response to status has been to insist that our contemporary status ideals are not inevitable, but man-made, and so they can be changed. Charleston in Sussex is a temple to British bohemianism. It was the home of the painter Vanessa Bell, sister of the writer Virginia Woolf. Here in the 1920s and 30s, Vanessa Bell and her friends, the Bloomsbury Group, started an experiment in living whose effects we're all still feeling today. Vanessa Bell's granddaughter, Virginia Nicholson, showed me around.
Virginia, there's an amazing atmosphere in this house. It feels so sort of relaxed and, dare I say it, bohemian.
Of course, this is where I remember everyone having dinner and meals, and there was a great sense of conviviality here.
What sort of subjects of conversation were people?
That's a hard one. Life, art, gossip,
sex.
You know, sex, who'd taken to the bottle, who'd had a letter from so-and-so.
But it's all very kind of handmade, is it? Hand-painted?
Absolutely. I mean, I always love the lampshade because it's like an upside-down colander and completely makeshift. They didn't bother too much with having things properly made.
Because it's not expensive, is it?
Oh, no, they never had much money. This is not an elite of people who were living a grand way of life at all. It's just people in a rented farmhouse in the countryside. You know, just letting rip a little bit. The place was wide open, you could do anything.
You feel more creative just walking around.
Well, it was messy, you know, and that was rather
Nicely
nice.
messy.
Nicely messy, and that was a way of life here.
Being a bohemian isn't about having a certain kind of job, income, or even house. It's about a way of looking at the world. In the words of the children's writer Arthur Ransom, Bohemia isn't a place, it's a state of mind. And what that state of mind boils down to is a spirit of independence and freedom, a commitment to live by your own values.
I think the core values were about living for art and rejecting materialism, rejecting the bourgeoisie, rejecting everything that they saw the bourgeoisie as standing for. They believed in truth, didn't they? These ideas of true living, true loving, and a great questioning of everything. Why can't we do things differently? Why can't we have different kinds of sexual relationships? Why can't we paint our houses in different colours? Why can't we dress differently? So it is about breaking rules and giving themselves a sense of validation in a way by doing that.
It's one of the cheering things about Bohemia that people who set out simply to live as they choose often end up winning greater freedom for everyone. Many of the freedoms we now take for granted, to talk to who we like, to have relationships with who we like, not to have to wear a hat in public, even to put garlic in our food, were first established in Bohemia.
Experimentation was of the essence here. I mean, you can go from everything to the simple infidelity, to the ménage à trois, to the ménage à quatre, to the commune, and points beyond. And I think that generation broke through a lot of barriers which we ought to be grateful for. In a curious way, we're all Bohemians now.
The Bohemian attitude has one serious drawback. It can easily spiral off into willful eccentricity.
Are you taking it for a walk? Yeah, I'm taking it for a walk. It's a new kind of pet.
In 1850, the French poet Gérard de Nerval ceased conforming to bourgeois ideas of suitable pets and acquired a lobster, which he led around Paris on the end of a blue ribbon.
Oh my God, is that real?
Yeah, it's a lobster.
Oh, Nicky, don't touch it.
It's called Augustus. See? It's sweet, isn't it?
Why should a lobster be any more ridiculous than a dog? Nerval questioned. They're peaceful, serious creatures. They know the secrets of the sea, and they don't bark.
Whatever the eccentricities of certain Bohemians, the Bohemian movement's enduring contribution has been to stand up for an alternative way of life. It has lent dignity and seriousness to a set of values overlooked by the bourgeois mainstream. Like Christianity, of which it was in many ways a secular replacement, appearing at just the time when Christianity was beginning to lose its grip on the imagination of people, Bohemia stood up for a spiritual as opposed to a material way of evaluating ourselves and others. Come on.
The whole idea of ownership is just so utterly vulgar. Why would one want to own anything? This is my car. Big deal. It looks much like someone else's my car. Everyone's got a my, and what does it reflect? Nothing except, you know, what Volvo said you ought to have.
They buy the lie. They do buy the lie of the new car every year, of the house that you have to own. I really feel that people have been robbed of life. I really do feel they've been robbed of the freedom of choice, the freedom of understanding and enjoying the world that we live in its infinite and finite beauty. People have been robbed and they've been sold this lie, hook, line and sinker.
In the Essex countryside near Harlow, I found Bohemian values alive and well. Penny Rimbaud and G. Voucher are members of Crass, an anarcho-punk music and art collective they founded in the late 1970s.
The door is never closed to anybody, you know, and
Anyone who comes to the door, you'll let them in?
they will always be welcome, and there is an unspoken understanding that you come to share, not to take. I mean, we have had strangers that come into the house and they've fallen asleep on the sofa. You think, well, that's incredible. They feel so safe, you know, and that, I think that's quite a, you know, I think that's a wonderful thing to happen, you know, and you can be in the middle of just about to serve a meal up and maybe 3 or 4 people come through the door. And it's like feeding the 5,000. It does stretch. It's not a problem. We grow a lot of food. We grow most of our food. We have a choice of maybe 10 vegetables in the winter, and we have a choice of maybe 15 in the summer. So, I mean, yes, we're self-sufficient if you don't fancy other foods that sometimes you fancy, you know. And
it's not so much a matter of doing without as doing with. I mean, we naturally do without. You know, and so anything else, I mean, if G goes shopping or if I go shopping, we come back with, you know, chocolate biscuits, then that is how other people would see being without, if you see what I mean, because it's actually, that's a special treat, you know, and we're all a little bit excited about
demolished
it.
in 2 minutes.
Yeah. And so we've learnt to live very, very simply, and one can live very, very simply, and it's to do with expectations.
Do you think of yourself as a bohemian? I mean, does that word appeal to you?
It appeals to me more than the other things that people like ourselves are often defined as being. I mean, because I like the historical context of it. I mean, I think a bohemian essentially seeks an authenticity.
There are many cynical people who, for example, they might watch you in the garden and just think, oh, these are just 2 old hippies living in the country. What do you think about that attitude?
I don't really mind at all what people think. That's their business, isn't it? I mean, I don't really care what people think. It really does not concern me what other people think.
So you really have, in a way, managed to completely uncouple yourself from concerns about status?
I don't even understand. I mean, when I say I don't understand the meaning of the word, I mean, I understand it in the dictionary sense.
You just don't feel it?
I don't.
It's not an emotion you recognise?
I can't comprehend it.
Penny and G have made real material sacrifices to live the way they do. But perhaps we don't need to starve ourselves of chocolate biscuits to gain something of their mental calm. I'm going to suggest some ways that we can all deal better with our anxieties about how well we're doing in life. Marcus Aurelius was Roman emperor from 161 to 180 AD. As such, he was the man with the highest status on the planet. But he was also, unusually for people who ruled the world, a philosopher.
Marcus Aurelius stood in a long philosophical tradition of writing about status, one dating back to the ancient Greeks 600 years before him. And the enduring legacy of that tradition has been to insist that what you're worth has very little to do with what other people think of you.
Marcus Aurelius wrote his great work of philosophy, the Meditations, whilst he was battling against bloodthirsty Germanic hordes on the furthest frontiers of his empire.
Just do a quick health and safety, because they're very conscious here. Can we make sure that any pointy, sharp things are on that side of the rope when we're back here?
There was a disappointing turnout when I came to watch the Colchester Roman Society, but they went on undeterred. Marcus Aurelius would have been proud of them. As an emperor, his behaviour would have been endlessly examined, praised by some, criticised by others. But he was aware of how untrustworthy it all was. He wrote his Meditations to remind himself to submit any views he heard about his character and achievements to his own reason before allowing them to affect his estimation of himself. My decency does not depend on the testimony of someone else. Will any man despise me? Let him see to it. But I will see to it that I may not be found doing or saying anything which deserves to be despised.
Mainly in the area of Hadrian's Wall. Weapons normally spears of various types, long thrusting, to cluster a small throwing javelin. For safety reasons, we aren't able to fire missiles today.
The Colchester Romans, like their most philosophical emperor, know better than to judge their own performance by the amount of applause they receive. Philosophy isn't saying that you're always admirable in everything that you do. Where it's really useful is in helping you to decide for yourself, by a process of logical thinking, how much justice lies in the world's assessment of you. Perhaps the most trenchant advocate of this tradition was the 19th century German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. He said, "We will gradually become indifferent to what goes on in the minds of other people when we acquire an adequate knowledge of the superficial nature of their thoughts, of the narrowness of their views, and of the number of their errors. Whoever attaches a lot of value to the opinions of others pays them too much honour."
For the youth transformation of the Avon representative is Avon Cosmetics.
This is the New Media Age Effectiveness Awards, a prestigious annual awards ceremony for the .com sector. Many of us work as much for the respect of our peers as for the money we earn. Schopenhauer urged us to beware.
Schopenhauer believed that we're prone to chronically overrate the opinions of others. We don't stop to ask ourselves on what basis these opinions have been formed. If we did, we would often find that ideas of who is successful and who is a failure are based on nothing more than suspicion, rumour and passion.
There's a sense of, yes, it's been adjudicated and we've been voted the best in the country, and we're very, very pleased to get it. We're over the moon.
to actually get recognised by these really influential and prestigious people, it's just the most amazing feeling.
It feels really surprisingly fantastic, and there's some sort of justification in terms of what we're trying to do.
Schopenhauer said, "Other people's heads are too wretched a place for true happiness to have its seat." Would a musician feel flattered by the loud applause of his audience, the philosopher asked, if it were known to him that it consisted entirely of deaf people? Schopenhauer's argument could be described as intelligent misanthropy. Its drawback is that we could end up like the philosopher himself did, with few friends, living alone in a flat in Frankfurt with only a poodle for company. But it also offers us a bracing antidote to our anxieties and vulnerability. The people whose good opinion we crave don't actually know us, so why let their verdicts govern what we make of ourselves?
So what Schopenhauer urges us to do is to trust ourselves, to analyse ourselves, rather than base our ideas on public opinion. What matters is not what we seem to the world, but what we in fact truly are.
If politics sets out to change the way that status is distributed, and philosophy reminds us to be skeptical of other people's judgments about our standing and success, there is another, perhaps even more fundamental way of rethinking the whole subject: art.
Art has traditionally had a very hierarchical sense of what and who is important, and that hierarchy has really been a reflection of the hierarchy outside the world of art. It's kings and queens who've come at the top. Most portraits are of aristocrats or of subjects from antiquity, from the classics. But in the 17th century, we see something new appearing, that suddenly ordinary people are given some of the canvas. They're told that they too can be important. In an artist like Pieter de Hoek behind me, a famous Dutch 17th century artist, we see that it can be an ordinary life that matters, that a woman tending her child, sweeping the yard or doing some laundry also has value and dignity.
Within paintings like de Hoek's lies an implicit subversion of any vision of life that could dismiss as insignificant and valueless a woman's domestic care. True status, art like this argues, does not necessarily lie where society conventionally places it. Jamie Thraves has made a film called The Lowdown, about drifting, insecure, inarticulate 20-somethings who can't decide what to do with their lives. Nothing very dramatic happens in it, but it reminded me of the message in art like de Hoek's, that even ordinary lives and everyday events can be full of significance and are worthy of respectful attention.
Sometimes I get depressed coming out of a cinema because I think that the lives that I've just seen portrayed have got nothing to do with my life at all. Maybe they're much more glamorous, the ending is happier. The end of The Lowdown, you don't think everyone's going to live happily ever after, and yet I think it does leave you feeling good because, for me at least, it shows me what real life is like, and as I say, makes you feel kind of less alone with the messiness of what real life is like.
And I think that that's the kind of thing I wanted to get across. I felt that, to me, that there's a huge chunk of life where nothing major happens, and I wanted to watch a character that's going through that period. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I don't think that many works of art, and this is kind of the problem with a lot of them, draw us away from those tiny moments and shift our attention to extraordinary events. So it's almost as though we kind of feel a bit embarrassed and lonely with our tiny moments, that most of our life is spent sort of sitting on a bed with your girlfriend, umming and erring. But yet films tend to teach us that that's not where the action is, that's not what's interesting.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I just think there's I was saying this, you know, that the idea that when you lose your keys, in that moment that you lose them and you panic, I find that all the things that are wrong in my life all come to a head in that moment. And, you know, someone's face has just constantly interesting, everyone's faces, isn't it? So I think that's... I think if you're just pointing a camera at a face, you're always going to be getting something interesting. So I don't think you can go wrong. You don't have to leave your bedroom to make an interesting piece of drama.
Where art is really useful is in helping us to deal with failure. Many of the greatest works of art are the stories of people who fail spectacularly in life.
Our fear of failing at things, at losing our job or our status, perhaps wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't for an awareness of how harshly other people tend to judge failure.
First story on the agenda today, right, Oedipus. Guy basically shags his mum and then cuts his eyes out and kills his dad. So it's an everyday tale. Nice. So we need a front page headline. I don't know. Sex with mum was blinding. Club foot love rat.
Tops his dad.
Tops his dad.
Club foot love rat tops his dad.
Yeah, that's it.
What we mind when we lose our status isn't just that we might have less money, it's also the way that other people are going to talk about us for having failed. And I think that's where art comes in. Many of the greatest tragedies of the Western tradition are stories of people who've lost their status, who've become, one way or another, losers.
I visited the offices of the Daily Sport in Manchester. I wanted to see how a group of tabloid journalists would be inclined to interpret the harrowing stories of failure in some of the great works of world literature.
Right, Othello. I'm in trouble here because I thought that was an ice cream. Does anyone know what Othello's about?
Othello.
He kills his lover in a jealous
His
rage.
lover was male or female?
Female.
What was he jealous about?
That she was sleeping with someone else.
And was she?
No.
So is that the full extent of the play, the whole 3 hours? Jealous man kills girlfriend?
That's the headline.
Six Squaddy.
Sicko Squaddy.
Sicko Squaddy, better, yeah. Sicko Squaddy.
Smothers.
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 What's the name of his bird?
Love Cheat.
Smothers, Shagappy, Squeeze.
Yeah, lovely
That's
that.
been 1950.
Yeah, Squeeze is a bit.
Oh, nice bit of alliteration, no?
Desi.
Mona.
Desi.
Sicko Squaddy Smothers Shag Happy Mona.
There we go.
That's cool, that's a winner, that.
And then Madame Bovary. Go on, fill us in.
In a small French town, unhappily married to local doctor,
Yeah.
she she starts having an affair with a younger guy, a young student.
Right.
She starts running up debt, huge debts.
Right.
She can't repay the debts. She can't tell her husband about it. She's in despair. Her lover lets her down. She commits suicide with arsenic and dies shortly after, leaving a distraught husband and little daughter, 2-year-old daughter.
Slimy Frog in Bizarre Love Triangle. Nice.
If there's something incongruous about these headlines, it's because we're used to thinking of the subjects they refer to as inherently complex, naturally deserving of a respectful attitude rather than a prurient and damning one.
There's nothing about many of the characters that we find in art that makes them inevitable objects of concern and even pity. If we do end up thinking of them as noble and dignified, it all has to do with the way that they're portrayed on the stage or on a page. It's the achievement of many artists to lend to people who could be described as losers, emotional compulsive, suicides, murderers, a level of sympathy that's owed but rarely paid to every human.
Ancient Greek historian Herodotus reports an interesting custom practiced by the Egyptians at their grandest social gatherings, feasts and picnics. When revelers were at their most exuberant, their thoughts focused on pleasure and power, servants would pass between the tables carrying skeletons on stretchers. The ritual was designed vividly to remind partygoers of their mortality. The anecdote intrigued me. It might seem unnecessarily grim to turn our thoughts to death, but doing so may in fact be one of the fastest ways to dispel any worries we might have about status. Nothing helps us as much to sort out our priorities in life.
The effect of the thought of death can be to lead us towards whatever we most value, and at the same time to encourage us to pay less attention to the views of other people who will not, after all, have to do the dying for us. The prospect of our own extinction can lead us to take more seriously what we most value in our hearts.
The contemplation of death has a long history in Western art. Vanitas paintings were hugely popular in the 17th century. They were hung in domestic environments, often in studies or bedrooms.
In this time, there were a lot of very wealthy individuals and a lot of people making a lot of money from trade. And so this newfound wealth made a new wealthy class who were buying these sort of paintings.
The canvases feature a contrasting muddle of objects, symbols of frivolity and worldly glory. And among them are placed the two great symbols of death and the brevity of life, a skull and an hourglass.
The Latin inscription here, Mors omnia vincit, death always wins.
The purpose of these works was not to leave their owners depressed by the vanity of all things. Rather, it was to embolden them to find fault with specific aspects of their experience, and to urge them to attend more seriously to the virtues of love, goodness, sincerity, humility, and kindness.
So how much would this reminder of the worthlessness of money and riches, how much would something like this now set you back?
But this one here, in the gallery, we're asking £50,000 for it.
It's a pity that powerful people today don't follow the example of their 17th century counterparts, because they might find the thought of death rather stimulating. Above all, it brings authenticity to social life, by removing from us many of the reasons for which society honours its members. For example, the capacity to throw dinner parties or to work effectively. In so doing, death reveals the fragility and so perhaps the worthlessness of the attentions we stand to gain through status. There may be no better way to clear the diary of engagements than to wonder who among our acquaintances would make the trip to the hospital bed. Mary Allen used to run the Royal Opera House. Now she spends most of her day gardening and trying to write a novel.
Oh no, I used to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, leave the house at 5:30, get to my desk at 6. Then I'd have 3 hours before anybody else turned up, when I could do my reading and my thinking and my writing. 9 o'clock through till 7, I had meetings. And then at 7 o'clock, I'd have to go out either to a performance or a dinner or some kind of function.
Did you get a chance to look at the flowers?
Occasionally, fleetingly, very, very fleetingly.
But on the whole, what were you mostly taken up with?
Just keeping the whole thing on the road. I remember in February '97 thinking, I can't carry on doing this much longer because I feel terribly empty. You know, what do I do with my life? I think about arts funding, arts politics, a bit of art if I'm lucky. I've got nothing else in my head. I've got nothing else I can talk about.
In 1999, Mary was diagnosed with breast cancer. She quit the high-flying career that had meant so much to her.
How did the thought of death change your values?
I think it makes you reassess everything almost instantly and overnight. I think one of the most important things to me was realising that through all those years when I'd been at the Arts Council and the Royal Opera House, I'd hoped that my friends would wait and wouldn't mind the fact that I wasn't spending too much time with them, but I'd always assumed that time, if not infinite, there was a reasonable amount of it. And that one of the most important things for me then was to just spend far more time and energy and make much more of a commitment to personal relationships. So that's my husband, my family, friendships.
And what started to matter less?
Oh, work. Work suddenly had the status of nothing but providing you with the money to live.
Whereas before, what had it been for you?
Oh, beforehand, I think it had been a means through which I could achieve all kinds of subsidiary objectives, like feeling good about myself, intellectual stimulus, in fact, all kinds of things that I could have provided for myself through other ways.
As conditional love starts to seem less interesting, so too may many of the things we pursue in order to secure it. If wealth, esteem and power bias the kind of love that will last only so long as our status holds, and yet if we're destined to end our lives defenseless and dishevelled, then we have an unusually clear reason to concentrate our energies on the relationships which matter.
Did your concerns about status diminish once you found out?
They vanished.
You vanished.
Vanished. Oh, well, it's irrelevant, really. And all I can concentrate on, if I am to die in the next year or two, is travelling from now to that point and travelling through that experience. And it is the quality of my life that matters. Not what anybody else thinks about my life, but my experience of my life. And I don't think I'd ever before that really so firmly been clear that it was my experience of my life that counted, not what anybody else thought.
Why do you think we so often need death to remind us of what's important in our lives?
Partly because it's actually rather a sweat to get going on all of this. It's much easier just to carry on doing what you've always done. I've always wanted to write. And actually it would have been easier if when I lay on my deathbed I could have said, oh, I might have written. If I'd had time I could have written. Say on your deathbed, well, I tried, but I wasn't terribly good. It's much more challenging.
Yeah.
Contrary to what an optimistic mindset teaches us, everything will, in fact, turn out for the worst. We will die, our achievements will be forgotten, everything we've strived for will be ignored and perhaps mocked, and even our names will be stamped into the ground. Whatever our status, we're all fated to end up as that most democratic of substances, dust. There is no wealth, said John Ruskin, but life, including all its powers of love, of joy, and of admiration.
If there's something strangely calming in the idea that we're all going to die, it's perhaps because something within us instinctively recognizes how many of our worries are bound up with things that are, in the wider scheme, pretty petty concerns. To consider ourselves from the perspective of 1,000 years from now, returned to dust in a smashed vault, is to be granted a rare, soothing vision of our own insignificance.